Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business. And tonight we will continue our dive into the Inferno. And just like in the beginning, we're halfway in our life's journey. When we last left Dante and Virgil, they were still in the seventh circle. Violent against themselves, violent against their neighbor, or violent against God. That's the seventh circle. They're still among the sodomites. Dante is approached by another group of souls. 3 who claim to recognize Dante as their countryman. The flames had charred their features beyond recognition, so they tell Dante their names. Dante recalls their names from his time in Florence and feels great pity for them. They ask if courtesy and valor still characterize their city, but Dante sadly replies that acts of excess and arrogance now reign. Before leaving the second zone, Virgil makes a strange request. He asks for the cord that Dante wears as a belt, and then he throws one end of it into a ravine filled with dark water. Dante watches incredulously as a horrible creature rises up before his eyes. And that is where we begin tonight. The monstrous shape lands on the brink, and Virgil salutes it ironically. It is Geryon, the monster of fraud. Virgil announces that they must fly down from the cliff on the back of this monster. While Virgil negotiates for their passage, Dante is sent to examine the usurers. These sinners sit in a crouch along the edge of the burning plain that approaches the cliff. Each of them has a leather purse around his neck, and each purse is blazoned with a coat of arms. Their eyes, gushing with tears, are forever fixed on these purses. Dante recognizes none of these sinners, but their coats of arms are unmistakably those of well-known Florentine families. Having understood who they are and the reason for their present condition, Dante cuts short his excursion and returns to find Virgil mounted on the back of Geryon. Dante joins his master, and they fly down from the great cliff. Their flight carries them from the hell of the violent and the bestial into the hell of the fraudulent and the malicious. Now see the sharp-tailed beast that mounts the brink. He passes mountains, breaks through walls and weapons. Behold the beast that makes the whole world stink. These were the words my master spoke to me, then signaled the weird beast to come to ground closer to the sheer edge of our rocky levee. The filthy prototype of fraud drew near and settled his head and breast upon the edge of the dark cliff, but let his tail hang clear. His face was innocent of every guile, benign and just in feature and expression, and under it, his body was half reptile. His 2 great paws were hairy to the armpits. All his back and breast and both his flanks were figured with bright knots and subtle circlets. Never was such a tapestry of bloom woven on earth by Tartar or by Turk, or not by Arcane at her flowering loom. As a ferry sometimes lies along the strand, part beached and part afloat, and as the beaver, up yonder in the guzzling German's land, squats halfway up the bank when a fight is on. Just so lay that most ravenous of beasts on the rim which bounds the burning sand with stone. His tail twitched in the void beyond that lip, thrashing and twisting up the envenomed fork which, like a scorpion's stinger, armed the tip. My guide said, "It is time now we draw near the monster." And descending on the right, we moved 10 paces outward to be clear of sand and flames. And when we were beside him, I saw upon the sand, a bit beyond us, some people crouching, close beside the berm. My master paused. "That you may take with you the full experience of this round," he said. "Go now, and see the last state of that crew. But let your talk be brief, and I will stay and reason with this beast till you return, that his strong back may serve us on our way." So further yet along the outer edge of the seventh circle, I moved on alone, and came to the sad people of the ledge. Their eyes burst with their grief. Their smoking hands jerked about their bodies, warding off now the flames and now the burning sands. Dogs in summer bit by fleas and gadflies, jerking their snouts about, twitching their paws now here, now there, behave no otherwise. I examined several faces there among that sooty throng, and I saw none I knew, but I observed that from each neck there hung an enormous purse, each marked with its own beast and its own colors, like a coat of arms. On these their streaming eyes appeared to feast. Looking about, I saw one purse display a zeur on, or a kind of lion, another on a blood-red field, a goose whiter than whey, and one that bore a huge and swollen sow or zeur on field argent, said to me, "What are you doing in this pit of sorrow? Leave us alone, and since you have not died, I'll have you know my neighbor Vitaliano has a place reserved for him right here at my side. A Paduan among Florentines. I sit here while hour by hour they nearly deafen me, shouting, 'Send us the sovereign cavalier with the purse of the 3 goats.'" He half arose, twisted his mouth, and darted out his tongue for all the world like an ox licking its nose. And I, afraid that any longer stay would anger him who had just warned me to be brief, left those exhausted souls without delay. Returned, I found my guide already mounted upon the rump of that monstrosity. He turned to me. "Now you must be undaunted. This beast must be our stairway to the pit. Mount it in front, and I will ride between you and the tail, lest you be poisoned by it." Like one so close to the quaternary chill that his nails are already pale, and his flesh trembles at the very sight of shade or a cool rill, so did I tremble at each frightful word. But his scolding filled me with that shame that makes the servant brave in the presence of his lord. I mounted the great shoulders of that freak and tried to say, "Now help me hold on," but my voice clicked in my throat, and I could not speak. But no sooner had I settled where he placed me than he, my stay, my comfort, and my courage in other perils, gathered and embraced me. Then he called out, "Now, Geryon, we are ready. Bear well in mind that his is living weight, and make your circles wide and your flight steady." As a small ship slides from breaching on its pier backward, so that monster slipped back from the rim, and when he had drawn clear, he swung about, and stretching out his tail, he worked it like an eel, and with his paws he gathered it in the air, while I turned pale. I think there was no greater fear the day Phaeton let loose the reins and burned the sky along the great scar of the Milky Way, nor when Icarus, too close to the sun's track, felt the wax melt, unfeathering his loins, and heard his father cry, turn back, than when I found myself in air, afloat in space with nothing visible but the enormous beast that bore me there. Slowly, slowly he swims on through space, wheels and descends, but I can sense it only by the way the wind blows upward past my face. Already, on the right, I heard the swell and thunder of the whirlpool. Looking down, I leaned my head out and stared into hell. I trembled again at the prospect of dismounting and cowered in on myself, for I saw fires on every hand, and I heard a song lamenting. And then I saw. Till then, I had but felt it. The course of our down spiral to the horrors that rose up from all sides of the pit. As a flight-worn falcon sinks down warily, though neither bird nor lure has signaled it, the falconer crying out, "What? Spent already?" then turns and in 100 spinning gyres sulks from her master's call, sullen and proud. So, to that bottom, lit by endless fires, the monster Geryon circled and fell, setting us down at the foot of the precipice of ragged rock on the 8th shelf of hell. And once freed of our weight, he shot from there into the dark like an arrow into air. Dismounted from Geryon, the poets find themselves in the 8th circle, called Malbolgia, the evil ditches. This is the upper half of the hell of the fraudulent and malicious. Malbolgia is a great circle of stone that slopes like an amphitheater. The slopes are divided into 10 concentric ditches, and within these ditches, each with his own kind, are punished those guilty of simple fraud. A series of stone dikes runs like spokes from the edge of the great cliff into the center of the place, and these serve as bridges. The poets bear left towards the first ditch, and Dante observes below him and to his right are the sinners of the first Bogia, the panderers and seducers. These make 2 files, one along either bank of the ditch, and are driven at endless fast walk by horned demons who hurry them along with great lashes. In life, these sinners goaded others on to serve their own foul purposes. So in hell, they are driven in their turn. The horned demons who drive them symbolize the sinner's own vicious natures, embodiments of their own guilty consciences. Dante may or may not have attended the horns of the demons to symbolize cuckoldry and adultery. The poets see Cassiamenko and Jason in the first pit, and pass on to the second, where they find the souls of the flatterers sunk in excrement, the true equivalent of their false flatteries on earth. They also observe Interminelli and Thias, and pass on. There is in hell a vast and sloping ground called Malbolgia, a lost place of stone as black as the great cliff that seals it round. Precisely in the center of that space, there yawns a well extremely wide and deep. I shall discuss it in its proper place. The border that remains between the well pit and the great cliff forms an enormous circle, and 10 descending troughs are cut into it, offering a general prospect like the ground that lies around one of those ancient castles whose walls are girded many times around by concentric moats. And just as from the portal, the castle's bridges run from moat to the last bank, so from the rock wall across the embankments and the ditches, high and narrow cliffs run to the center well, which cuts and gathers them like rat-eye. Here, shaken from the back of Geryon, we found ourselves. My guide kept to the left, and I walked after him. So we moved on. Below, on my right, and filling the first ditch along both banks, new souls in pain appeared, new torments, and new devils black as pitch. All of these sinners were naked. On our side of the middle, they walked towards us. On the other, in our direction, but with swifter stride. Just so the Romans, because of the great throng in the year of the Jubilee, divide the bridge in order that the crowds may pass along, so that all face the castle as they go on one side towards St. Peter's, while on the other all move along facing towards Mount Giordano. And everywhere along that hideous track, I saw horned demons with enormous lashes move through these souls, scourging them on the back. Ah, how the stragglers of that long route stirred their legs quick march at the first crack of the lash. Certainly no one waited a second or third. As we went on, one face in that procession caught my eye, and I said, "That sinner there, it is certainly not the first time I've seen that one." I stopped, therefore, to study him, and my guide, out of his kindness, waited, and even allowed me to walk back a few steps at the sinner's side. And that flayed spirit, seeing me turn around, thought to hide his face. But I called to him, "You there, that walk along with your eyes on the ground. If those are not false features, then I know you as Venedico Cassiamenco of Bologna. What brings you here among this petty crew?" And he replied, "I speak unwillingly, but something in your living voice, in which I hear the world again, stirs and compels me. It was I who brought the fair Isola round to serve the will and lust of the Marquis, however sordid that old tale may sound. There are many more from Bologna who weep away eternity in this ditch. We fill it so there are not as many tongues that are taught to say Sippa in all the land that lies between the Reno and the Savino, as you must know from the many tales of our avarice and spleen." And as he spoke, one of those lashes fell across his back, and a demon cried, "Move on, you pimp! There are no women here to sell." Turning away then, I rejoined my guide. We came in a few steps to a raised ridge that made a passage to the other side. This we climbed easily, and turning right along the jagged crest, we left behind the eternal circling of those souls in flight. And when we reached the part of which the stone was tunneled for the passage of the scourged, my guide said, "Stop a minute and look down on these other misbegotten wraiths of sin. You have not seen their faces, for they moved in the same direction we were headed in." So from that bridge we looked down on the throng that hurried towards us on the other side. Here, too, the whiplash hurried them along. And the good master, studying that train, said, "Look there, at that soul that approaches and seems to shed no tears for all his pain. What kingliness moves with him even in hell? It is Jason, who by courage and good advice made off with the Cochlean ram. Later it fell that he passed Lemnos, where the women of wrath, enraged by Venus's curse that drove their lovers out of their arms, put all their males to death. There, with honeyed tongue and his dishonest lover's wiles, he guided Hypsipyle, who, in the slaughter, had gulled all the rest. And there he left her, pregnant and forsaken. Such guilt condemns him to such punishment, and also for Medea is vengeance taken. All seducers march here to the whip. Let us say no more about this valley, and those it closes in its stony grip." We had already come to where the walk crosses the second bank, from which it lifts another arch, spanning from rock to rock. Here we heard people whine in the next chasm, and knock and thump themselves with open palms and blubber through their snouts as if in a spasm. Steaming from that pit, a vapor rose over the banks, crusting them with a slime that sickened my eyes and hammered at my nose. The chasm sinks so deep we could not sight its bottom anywhere until we climbed along the rock arch to its greatest height. Once there, I peered down, and I saw long lines of people in a river of excrement that seemed the overflow of the world's latrines. I saw among the felons of that pit one wraith who might or might not have been tonsured. One could not tell. He was so smeared with shit. He bellowed, "You there! Why do you stare at me more than all the others in this stew?" And I to him, "Because if memory serves me, I knew you when your hair was dry. You are Alessio Interminelli de Lucia. That is why I pick you from this filthy fry." And my guide prompted then, "Lean forward a bit and look beyond him. There, do you see that one scratching herself with dingy nails? The strumpet who fidgets to her feet, then to a crotch? It's the whore, Tias, who told her lover when he sent to ask her, 'Do you thank me much?' Much, nay, past all believing. And with this, let us turn from the sight of this abyss." Dante comes upon the Simoniacs, sellers of ecclesiastic favors and offices, and his heart overflows with the wrath he feels against those who corrupt the things of God. This Bogia is lined with round tube-like holes, and the sinners are placed in them upside down with the soles of their feet ablaze. The heat of the blaze is proportioned to their guilt. These holes in which the sinners are placed are debased equivalents of the baptismal fonts common in the cities of northern Italy, and the sinner's confinement in them is temporary. As new sinners arrive, the souls drop through the bottom of their holes and disappear eternally into the crevices of the rock. As always, the punishment is a symbolic retribution. Just as the Simoniacs made a mock of holy office, so are they turned upside down in a mockery of the baptismal font. Just as they made a mockery of the holy water of baptism, so is their hellish baptism by fire, after which they are wholly immersed in the crevices below. Oily fire that licks at their souls might also suggest a travesty on the oil used in extreme unction, its last rites for the dying. Virgil carries Dante down an almost sheer ledge and lets him speak to one who is the chief sinner of that place, Pope Nicholas III. Dante delivers himself of another stirring denunciation of those who have corrupted church office, and Virgil carries him back up the steep ledge towards the fourth Bogia. "O Simon Magus! O you wretched crew who follow him, pandering for silver and gold, the things of God, which should be wedded to love and righteousness. O thieves for hire, now must the trump of judgments sound your doom here in the third fosse of the rim of fire." We had already made our way across to the next grave, and to that part of the bridge which hangs above the midpoint of the fosse. O sovereign wisdom, how thine art doth shine in heaven, on earth, and in the evil world. How justified doth thy power judge and assign. I saw along the walls and on the ground long rows of holes cut in the livid stone. All were cut to a size, and all were round. They seemed to be exactly the same size as those in the front of my beautiful San Giovanni, built to protect the priests who come to baptize, one of which, not so long ago, I broke open to rescue a boy who was wedged and drowning in it. Be this enough to undeceive all men. From every mouth, a sinner's legs stuck out as far as the calf. The soles were all ablaze, and the joints of the legs quivered and writhed about. Withers and tethers would have snapped in their throes. As oiled things blaze upon the surface only, so did they burn from the heels to the points of their toes. "Master," I said, "who is that one in the fire, who writhes and quivers more than all the others? From him the ruddy flames seem to leap higher." And he to me, "If you wish for me to carry you down along that lower bank, you may learn from him who he is and the evil he has done." And I, "What you will, I will. You are my lord, and I know I depart nothing from your wish, and you know my mind beyond my spoken word." We moved to the fourth ridge, and turning left, my guide descended by a jagged path into the straight and perforated cleft. Thus the good master bore me down the dim and rocky slope, and did not put me down till we reached the one whose legs did penance for him. "Whoever you are, sad spirit," I began, "who lie here?" "Oh, whoever you are, sad spirit, 3. "Whoever you are, sad spirit," I began, "who lie here with your head below your heels and planted like a stake, speak if you can." I stood like a friar who gives the sacrament to a hired assassin, who, fixed in the hole, recalls him and delays his death a moment. "Are you there already, Boniface? Are you there already?" he cried. "By several years the writ has lied, and all that gold and all that care. Are you already sated with the treasure for which you dared to turn on that sweet lady and trick and pluck and bleed her at your pleasure?" I stood like one caught in some raillery, not understanding what is said to him, lost for an answer to such mockery. Then Virgil said, "Say to him, I am not he. I am not who you think." And I replied as my good master has instructed me. The sinner's feet jerked madly. Then again his voice rose, this time choked with sighs and tears, and said at last, "What do you want of me then? If to know who I am drives you so fearfully that you descend the bank to ask it, know that the great mantle was once hung upon me. And in truth I was a son of the she-bear, so sly and eager to push my whelps ahead that I pursued wealth above and myself here. Beneath my head are dragged all who have gone before me in buying and selling holy office. They cower in the fissures of the stone. I too shall be plunged down when that great cheat for whom I took you comes here in his turn. Longer already have I baked my feet and been planted upside down than he shall be before the West sends down a lawless shepherd of uglier deeds to cover him and me. He will be a new Jason of the Maccabees, and just as that king bent to his high priest's will, so shall the French king do as this one please. Maybe, I cannot say. I grew too brash at this point, for when he had finished speaking, I said, "Indeed. Now tell me how much our Lord required of Peter in guarantee before he put the keys into his keeping. Surely the Lord asked nothing but follow me. Nor did Peter, nor the others ask silver or gold of Matthew when they chose him for the place the despicable and damned apostles sold. Therefore, stay as you are. This hole well fits you, and keep a good guard on the ill-won wealth that once made you so bold towards Charles of Anjou. And were it not that I am still constrained by the reverence that I owe to the great keys you held in life, I should not have refrained from using other words and sharper still, for this avarice of yours grieves all the world, tramples the virtuous, and exalts the evil. Of such as you was the evangelist's vision, when she saw she who sits upon the waters, locked with the kings of earth in fornication. She was born with 7 heads, and 10 enormous and shining horns strengthened, and made her glad, as long as love and virtue pleased her spouse. Gold and silver are the gods you adore. In what are you different from the idolater, save that he worships one? And are you a score? Ah, Constantine, what evil marked the hour, not of your conversation, but of the fee the first rich father took from you in dower. And as I sang him this tune, he began to twitch and kick both feet out wildly, as if in rage or gnawed by conscience, little matter which. And I think, indeed, it pleased my guide. His look was all approval as he stood beside me, intent upon each word of truth I spoke. He approached, and with both arms he lifted me, and when he had gathered me against his breast, remounted the rocky path out of the valley. Nor did he tire of holding me collapsed to him, until we reached the topmost point of the arch, which crosses from the 4th to the 5th rim of the pits of woe. Arrived on the bridge, he tenderly set down the heavy burden he had been pleasured to carry up that ledge, which would have been hard climbing for a goat. Here I looked down on still another moat.